Chapter 10. The Tides of Frustration. Monday morning, Tommy reminded Brian of his tasks over breakfast. And in Brian's usual, "I got this" manner, he said, "No problem." The morning moved along smoothly, allowing them to leave for the bus stop early enough Tommy could get to work before his 7 a.m. call. Still, despite the promising start, Tommy's workday did not begin well. The morning call was a mess. There was leadership from other areas of the company unloading their frustration on Tommy's offshore team. The offshore team was doing their best to explain the process that must happen before the code is published and tested. But with the new Wild Wild West way of dumping untested code on the offshore team was clogging up the system. Several times, Tommy tried to step in and explain that the new projects needed to come through the pipeline and not just jump to the front of the line. Each time Tommy would start, somebody would announce, "By the authority of Mr. Maybe." Then it would become a contest of who could speak over each other and over other department heads. Luckily, time ran out and the call ended. At his second meeting of the morning, he found himself facing the firing squad during the weekly team meeting that had fully transitioned from a focused gathering into a complaint session. The number of complaints about other departments set a new all-time high, and their issues were complicating the delivery of the upcoming yearly release project. Tommy tried to maintain a calm demeanor and lay the groundwork for a compromise, but when the room spun further out of control, with people interrupting and talking over one another, some in the group were very vocal about their feelings on the changes in both their working environment and their operating procedures. There were also silent glares that either burned right through Tommy or glazed off into the distance. Many of the team members looked like frightened rabbits, just waiting for the cage to open so they could dash into the forest and hide from the impending thunderstorm. After the meeting, Michael and Denise visited Tommy's office to express their concern about the upcoming yearly release project. There were mounting issues with the project, including bugs in the code that needed to be fixed. The overall quality of the work being delivered to the team was very poor. They were very far behind in receiving essential deliveries and didn't see a way to make up the time while allowing their departments to properly test the deliverables, return the bad code to the developers, and retest until it was correct. Michael desperately wanted someone to let the business stakeholders, including the senior management and departments expecting the software, know the project dates were in trouble and if they wanted a quality product. Denise raised a concern that if the product did not get proper testing, the delivery team would be on the hook for any issues that the client found in production. Tommy offered a genuine expression of gratitude after they had finished, thanking them for taking the time to come to his office and share their concerns. In his normal manner of "don't just bring complaints, also bring solutions," he asked them if they had any suggestions to help solve these concerns. "Sure, just tell them it will be a different delivery date or they're going to get a crap product," Michael replied. "Remember, good sir, like the picture behind your desk says, high quality, quickly, low cost. You were the one who says you can only pick 2 of the 3 ways to deliver a product. Ask them which 2 they would like." He flashed his half-hearted smile as he left the room. Here's a picture of the picture. Tommy sat there looking at the picture Michael referenced, and all of his memorabilia from the past corporate events, fun times he'd had with his team, and the keepsakes that people had given him when they returned from vacations or adventures. The veins in his neck and jaw tightened, feeling as if they were passing molasses. It was time for his blood pressure to begin its daily climb. Later that day, in Mr. Maybe's office, Tommy tried to carefully discuss his team's concerns about the delivery dates and the quality of the work given to the release. Mr. Maybe lashed out at Tommy, telling him he was easily one of the worst leaders he had to work with, and it wouldn't be long before he wouldn't have to worry about Tommy's incompetence anymore. Tommy, taking it on the chin, responded in a calm manner, "Why is it that you seem to dislike me so much and are so adversarial?" Mr. Maybe got right to the point. "You don't deliver what I tell you to do." Tommy's cool demeanor began to unwind as his temper and emotions quickly erupted. "What do you mean I don't do what you tell me to do? I have been picking up the pieces of my departments and many others since you've been playing boss and destroying years of hard work." Mr. Maybe proclaimed that he would be taking over the next week's meeting with the team and ordered him out of his office. Tommy spent the next 2 days trying to identify the missing parts of the yearly release project. Heading home later than usual, he called Brian to let him know he had picked up his favorite food as a treat. He pulled into the driveway to see as the sun was just beginning to set. Hank was still out in the pasture, and Brian was riding his bicycle up and down the driveway as if he were racing a motorcycle. As Tommy drove closer, Brian yelled, "I'll race you, Dad!" And off he went up the gravel driveway towards the house. Tommy revved the engine as if he were going to start the race, but of course Brian won. In preparation for dinner, they headed for the kitchen table. Tommy stuck to the house rules that all meals were to be in the kitchen or dining area, even on takeout nights. Brian loved to test this rule by trying to eat on the run and sneak treats into the TV area. There would be no sneaking tonight. They joked about Brian stumbling to use chopsticks with his steamed rice and dumplings. Tommy liked seeing him tackle the challenge of using the chopsticks. Soon a discussion of homework and chores bubbled up. Brian waited until his dad had finished talking, then hung his head. "Well, funny you should ask. I have a note from my math teacher for not turning in my work today." "What?" Brian looked directly at Brian. What? Tommy looked directly at Brian. Calmly but firmly, he said, I helped you with it last night." "I know, but I forgot it on my desk in my room." "Come on, buddy. You have to get it back to school. This is important, and it's one of your tasks." "I know. I just forgot." "Did you forget Hank as well?" "Ah, darn it. I did. Can you do it tonight?" Tommy slowly shook his head no. "Man, Dad, it's already dark now." "Nope, buddy. These are your chores. I tell you what, I will sit on the porch while you go do it." "Please," Brian begged. "Nope, not gonna happen. Come on, let's finish up. Check tonight's homework." A short time later, Tommy sat on the porch reviewing his to-do list, and he realized he had not paid a few bills on time and was going to incur some late fees. Ouch! That night, while tucking Brian in, a discussion came up of who should receive credit for the horse. Sadly, Tom began, "I don't believe you should receive reward since I had to remind you to do both your schoolwork and you missed your chores." Pouting, Brian asked, "Did you do your chores?" "Well, most of them," Tommy replied. "How do I know you did?" "You just have to trust me." "That's not fair." "Why?" "Because I always trust you, but you aren't trusting me." "Yes, I am. You just made a mistake and did not get your chores done. You can do better the rest of the week." I still don't think it's fair." "Well, let's see how the rest of the week goes, okay?" Brian made one of his signature expressions that revealed he was focused on something. "Okay, Dad. Love you." The next morning was a fresh start, and Brian shooting off to visit with Hank and letting him out of the barn to explore the pasture. Tommy and Brian finished breakfast, then headed out for school and the bus stop, and then to work. Tommy had to maneuver around 3 limbs that had recently reached to the driveway and were threatening to scratch up his truck. On his way, he made a mental note to take care of it when he had time. When Tommy got to the office, Bart asked Tommy and Mr. Maybe to visit with him in his office. Tommy dropped his things off at his desk and then headed over. Once the men arrived, Bart expressed his concern about the yearly release project. Mr. Maybe assured him that there was no reason to worry. All of the departments have been completing their work and getting it over to Tommy's delivery group, which has the responsibility of completing this on time, he explained. The delivery team does not bear the full responsibility of making projected dates, nor the quality of the other divisions' work, Tommy interrupted. In response, Mr. Maybe began openly chastising Tommy and his departments. He rallied against the mountain of insubordination that the delivery group displayed in their perceived lack of quality leadership. Tommy kept trying to speak, but was talked over by Mr. Mabee. His efforts to make sure Bart knew that the other departments were delivering bad code that did not work and was clogging up the pipeline. And the delivery team had to continually keep sending it back for patching, which seemed futile. The meeting was not going as Bart had planned, but listening to these two go at each other helped him begin to understand some of the rumblings of discontent coming from the lower divisions. After allowing the battle to continue for some time, and was hoping it would peter out, he intervened. Tommy, please prepare a presentation on the status of the project. Include the incoming flow of work, expected timetables, and critical issues list for the stakeholders meeting. And guys, please cool the emotions and bickering tones before the meeting and show some unity. Over the next few days, Tommy focused on how to help the other departments get their information ready for the presentation. With only 4 weeks to go before the project was scheduled to go live, when the employees and customers would be using the new software, he knew that long days and nights would be necessary if they even had a remote chance of being successful at making it past the finish line. Tommy also tried to lower the expectations and shorten the number of features that were put into the release. It was his hopes that he would convince or prepare others for a limited release that would only have a few core features and then introduce additional features at a later date. His campaigning did not go unnoticed by Mr. Mabee, who was visibly upset that people seemed to be preparing for failure. Tommy tried to explain his reasoning to Mr. Mabee that he felt they needed business to prepare for an emergency plan while understanding ways to turn off changes that were not critical. Tommy worked closely with his team in keeping the fires from distracting them and helped the communications between the divisions. Both Thursday and Friday were grueling, and his head was constantly under pressure as if it were simply about to pop. The project manager, Ben, spent many hours developing revisions to the timelines, classifying projects as either work completed or work yet not turned in over the team's testing. One of the new issues they had never really confronted was the amount of work coming into the department's work queue. Much of it was simply far below par and had been sent back to the originating department for reworking. This rerouting meant testing had to start over, and additional testing was needed in the coding that had been interacted with for its functionality. To make matters worse, code testing was a tedious and time-consuming process. As the weekend approaches, there was a feeling that the ship was beginning to move in the right direction. The fear of not getting to the scheduled completion date was on everyone's mind, but the mood was shifting to fight rather than flight. Tommy's team was trying to fight and push towards a common goal. There were those who were at their breaking point, but Tommy's leadership style ensured the people who needed him were kept close. On Saturday, while reviewing Brian's weekly homework report, the chores schedule, Tommy realized that they had both missed the mark about remembering their chores during the week. He offered a trip to get a treat so they could brainstorm about what would help them focus. As they enjoyed their scoops, Brian mentioned that if things were written down so he could see them every day, it might help. A few brain freezes later, they visited an office supply store and picked up a new whiteboard and a pack of 20 colored dry erase pens. According to Brian, the 4 and 10 packs were for people who had limited imaginations. Tommy didn't want to debate this logic. At home, Tommy and Brian worked together to mount the whiteboard in the hall. Recalling what Vanessa had told them, Tommy wrote out a list of instructions, but customized it for their duties on hand. Little list. Announce your intentions. By the end of the week, we will both complete our daily tasks. Be consistent with your actions. Every morning, we remind ourselves what is due and what's due at the end of the week. Every evening, we will check to make sure we've completed our tasks. Reward positive behavior. Brian can stay up 30 minutes each night he's completed his tasks. Tommy gets to kick the soccer ball as hard as he wants down the driveway each night his tasks are complete, and Brian has to fetch it. The midweek reward is dinner out, also known as boys' night. Completion reward, Brian gets $5, Tommy a trip to get his truck washed. Reflection: next Sunday, we will reset our goals as needed. And the board was laid out like so. After dinner, Brian noticed someone walking up the driveway. He and the dog sprinted out to the wraparound porch to see who the invader could be. Recognizing Maisie, he lit up like lightning had just run through his little frame. The dogs lit up in turn from the energy bouncing off Brian and began to run around as Brian made his way around to the porch and down to the stairs towards the lawn. Maisie high-fived Brian and followed him as he guided her up to the house. The dogs were still close by. There would surely be more excitement. She greeted Tommy with a smile and a comical hi, as Brian still had her in tow and on the way to the main area of the house. Once anchored in on a love seat, she announced that she had stopped by to see how things were coming with the boys and offered Brian a treat for taking care of Hank. Then she magically produced some large tickets, explaining these tickets were to attend a traveling county fair that was visiting in a few weeks. "Sweet," Brian proclaimed. Tommy smiled and said, "Is this a ploy to get Brian to take care of more animals?" Maisie laughed and said, "Maybe." Not skipping a beat, Brian added, "Maybe they will have elephants." Maisie assured them there would be no elephants, just farm animals, but she would enjoy watching Tommy tame an elephant. She also explained that she would be looking after the animals while the fair was in town. As if there wasn't a moment to lose, Brian beckoned Maisie down the corridor to show her the new addition to the wall. Maisie and Brian added the date of the fair to the section they titled "Don't Forget." The night critters were beginning their nighttime opera, reminding Tommy that it was approaching Brian's bedtime. After a bath, several trips to the kitchen, and a long excursion to locate the dogs, Brian strolled by Maisie and asked, "Are you going to tuck me in?" He had developed a habit of getting Maisie to tuck him in whenever she was around. While she was tucking him in, she softly said, "Maybe for next week's reward, we can add a behind-the-scenes tour. If you get all your tasks done." While Brian sat quietly, and she could see that he was very focused. After this, he paused, and he said, "What about Dad?" "Well, let's make him clean some of the horse stalls if he doesn't get his task complete." They both laughed, and she dimmed the lights, and they wished each other a good night. Come Monday, Tommy thought about all the work he had done over the weekend and how things seemed to be getting better. He enjoyed the morning ride through the countryside to get to the office, but slowly the fog of war began to settle as he approached the building. After settling into his office, he headed into the department conference room for a morning kickoff. Thankfully, Mr. Mabee never showed as he had threatened, but Ashley from HR sat in. The tide of complaining was approaching in its normal level until Ben's new charts, graphs, and timelines made it clear to everyone exactly what they were on for the project, and they were discussing helping. The tide of complaining was approaching its normal level until Ben's new charts, graphs, and timelines made it clear to everyone exactly where they were on the project they were discussing, helping them to focus their energy in productive discussions. The charts included what the original projected completion date was, the revised date based on the current pace of work, and how many working hours it would take to finish the testing and certify the product was complete and ready to use. The graphs also outlined the completion rate of the outstanding work, which was coming in at a steady climb at about 45 degrees, meaning it was going to take at least 10 more weeks of hard work for the departments outside of Tommy's area. Ashley asked why the deployment team wasn't fully responsible for the product's deployment. Michael, waving his hand in the air like a schoolboy who knows the answer to a question on a big test, explained, "The departments group is made up of 9 departments who receive the individual contributions from about 10 different departments within the organization that are not reporting to Tommy. We assemble the parts and test that they all work together. If any of the individual contributors don't work properly, the department team send it back to the group that provided the code, with instructions about what needs to be fixed. Then a particular department has to fix the errors and resubmit their work to us, and the whole process has to start over again. Denise could tell they were losing Ashley, so she stepped in and said, "Let me put it in English for you, since Michael likes to talk too much. Think of a book that has 10 chapters, and each chapter has a different author. We act like the editor and put the book together, then read it. If the chapter does not fit the story or just isn't good, we give it back to the person who wrote that chapter and ask them to fix it. Then we have to reread it again to see if it fits into the book properly." Ashley laughed and said, "Thank you, Denise." "Oh, you wait until lunch," Michael said to Denise. The room laughed for the first time in a long time. Ben completed his presentation by explaining that they would hit the desired target date. The graph would need to be so steep that it was almost a vertical line. Later that day, Tommy presented the information to Bart, Mr. Mabey, Ashley, and a few department heads whose departments would be using the software, and a few concerned board members. With some caution, he advised that they move the date out to reduce the number of deliverables for the yearly release project. Bart was visibly concerned about the project being so far off track. It was not typical for a project to be this far off its scheduled delivery dates, or for there to be so much difficulty moving it along. He expressed concern for the end user who might end up using a software package that was well below the standards they'd all worked so hard to adhere to in the past. Tommy began to explain. "The changes in the operating procedure and policies are colliding with a major release schedule," he said. "In hindsight, maybe we should have finished the annual release project, then taken a step-by-step approach to rolling out the organizational changes." Mr. Mabey abruptly stood up, waved his hands in Tommy's direction, and pointed to the door. Tommy just stood there looking a bit confused and trying to regulate his emotions. It was unprecedented for anyone presenting this type of meeting to be so boldly and awkwardly dismissed. Bart instructed Tommy to stay, and for Mr. Mabey to provide his observations and recommendations. Mr. Mabey continued standing, but did not begin to speak until Tommy had taken his seat. He began by tearing apart the presentation and making accusations that called for numerous unsubstantiated facts, focusing on the fact that the delivery group provided the original timelines and arguing that they were now blaming others for their shortcomings. Again and again, he circled back to delivery is in their name. Tommy yet again denied the problems were his team alone, but emphasized they were owning to a range of issues surfacing from across the organization. He said, "A year ago, when we started this endeavor, the timelines were based on formulas proven year after year to be correct." "Why then could you not make your deadlines this year?" Mr. Mabey answered. His body postured as if he were delivering a killer blow. "It's like making good cookies. You follow the recipe," Tommy answered. "When you follow the same recipe, you have the same variables. You should get the same results. But if you begin to change the variables, you might end up with better cookies, or you might ruin the whole batch. What I do know is that it's best to experiment with the recipe in small batches before you enter the year's biggest competition. So your biggest effort is your best. We changed everything about our recipe and variables right before our largest delivery of the year, all at one time and without really explaining the changes to anyone that was doing the baking." The room fell quiet. It was as if the air has just been siphoned off. Your little story may be fine excuse for first-year managers, but a senior professional should be able to overcome the deliverer and deliver what they are told to deliver, regardless. "You are failing miserably," Mr. Mabey replied, looking confidently at Bart. "This is why you can't grow the company. You have incompetent management team who are both lethargic and insubordinate. The officers of the company asked Mr. Mabey what he felt they should do. Mr. Mabey spun into action, declaring that the dates for the delivery were fixed in stone, and as far as he was concerned, and Tommy should be released from the organization at once. Tommy's heart sank, and he began to feel sick to his stomach. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Betraying a touch of anger in his voice, Bart declared, "No one is going to be proposing someone's release from the organization today. And this was not the time nor place for such comments. Mr. Maybe, have a seat. We are going to table this group meeting until next week. As far as the dates go, I would like Mr. Divers to meet with both HR and our company grievance officers to discuss the information from this meeting and other meetings that are happening throughout the day." As they left the meeting room, Mr. Maybe cheerfully told Tommy, "It won't be long now. You may have Bart covering for you and trying to make me look bad to the rest of the executive team, but even he won't be able to save you." It took everything Tommy had not to engage with Mr. Maybe at that moment. But he'd worked with Bart for many years and he trusted him. Tommy went to his office and called an emergency meeting with his department leaders to explain what they needed for the rest of the week, and he asked that they show support for the idea. The plan was not easy sell, but explained that it would show what they could do under extreme circumstances. For most of the team, the hours of the work week were going to increase greatly. The stress was going to become elevated even further, and their communication abilities with other departments outside their areas of influence was going to be strained and tested. It would require around-the-clock work from each team member and all hands on dock from offshore in the groups. Meals and refreshments would be supplied. This all-hands-on-deck emergency push would provide a good baseline to test Ben's assumptions on what is possible to deliver if the group was truly operating at 100% capacity. This process was going to be akin to holding a gas pedal on the car floor just to see how far the car could go, how fast the car could go. Ben said he was worried that they could not do this for more than a few days, but let's read that over. Ben said he was worried that they could do this for a few days, but not for 7+ weeks. I know, but we need a best case baseline as where we are now and what's even possible, Tommy replied. Once there was an agreement on the plan, all the department's directors, leads, and various people involved with the project were called together to explain what needed to happen. A few departments from other areas of the organizations definitely did not buy in and were very resistant to do more than what they were already doing. Finally, after some skillful deliberation, negotiation, assertions, and a few big IOUs, those not directly under Tommy's leadership reluctantly agreed to offer some support, while all of Tommy's department leaders agreed to show their full support for the next few days. For the rest of the week, including Saturday and Sunday, the teams pushed 14 to 16 hours a day, while the offshore teams were working closer to 17-hour shifts. It was a grueling and required a lot of focus. During the weekend, Tommy had food delivered to those that wanted it. He even made personal visits to some of the local team members' homes and thanked them, and he brought cards and flowers to their families as an apology for keeping them separated during this time. The weekend was a blur with everything going on at work. Maisie came over for a bit on Saturday to help Brian with his homework and provide distractions so Tommy could focus on the work. She invited Brian to accompany her to the feed store on Saturday to purchase supplies for Hank. When they returned, they had takeout for Tommy, and based on the ice cream stains on Brian's shirt, they had been a stop by the sweet shop as well. After dinner, Brian said he wanted to review the board with Maisie while Maisie was there. They all made their way down the hall, and Brian launched into a full explanation that he had all of his check marks by all of his tasks and even the bonus ones, but Dad was missing a few. Maisie and Brian giggled as if they had a secret and Tommy was being left out. "Okay, what is it?" "I have to add a few more to mine in the coming week." "Nope," Brian said slyly. "You get a consequence." "Oh, really?" "Yep. What is it?" "Maisie will tell you after I go to bed." Giggling, Brian ran up to his room calling for the dogs. Tommy and Maisie watched out of amazement the amount of energy Brian could summon before bed and command he had over his little canine companions. After the rustling calmed down from the bathroom and the assault on the bed frame was complete, there was a call for Maisie to come up and please tuck him in.